Hello everyone. Today we'll talk about how to anchor. Anchor what? Anchor in a vibration. So there's this saying that I often use whenever we have sort of mentoring conversations about communication. That people will likely forget what you told them. They will probably forget what you did with them or to them, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And it's a very similar thing with when you consider this kind of vibrational plane. How you're feeling, your emotional memory of a vibration is more important than whatever the meaning it was trying to carry, either with words or in a social context. Anything like that is absolutely secondary to the emotion you felt during that time. Now, if you think of memories from your childhood, whenever you can go back as far as possible, many people will wind up remembering unusual elements like certain smell they haven't smelled throughout their life since, or a color, maybe something oversaturated perceived through child's eyes, that sort of stuff. However, usually it is associated with a strong emotion. And sometimes, it's valuable to uncover this emotion, see what was the cause there, whether it was positive, negative in this perception, in this context. However, the trick is this emotional state is anchored in something that is not emotional. So, for example, emotion of joy is anchored in a specific smell. Whenever you think to yourself, smells like Christmas, or smells like fear, right? Smells or tastes are actually super powerful stimuli, way more powerful than visual or auditory, that can trigger emotions. Now, when we think how to anchor our own kind of vibrational states, think of when you are in meditation. If, for example, you're using some sort of soundtrack to meditate, your brain may start treating it as a cue. It's not unlike a hypnotic cue that is given by a therapist, for example, to go into the trance state on a cue, right? When I snap my fingers and say sleep, you will go into the trance state. And this can happen infallibly every time the therapist does that. So if you meditate to a specific track, you may notice that your brain immediately falls into a meditative state whenever you hear the, say, music. Also, well, there are some cases where you're doing something you don't like, then your brain will rebel and do something opposite. But I don't think, if we're trying to relate this kind of high vibrational events, that this problem should arise. If you're forcing yourself to meditate, there's probably something wrong. Okay, as with every training, motivation is important. Motivation is a bit of a challenge, especially at the beginning, but forcing oneself will probably be counterproductive. While we're at the subject, so whenever we're talking about motivating somebody to do something they don't like, so they can become something they do like to become, this motivational part has to start a few steps earlier. You have to first figure out a reward for your ego, and then introduce the task. Ego cannot associate the task with the negative emotion, right? It has to be few steps, few layers of whatever you do. So to give you an example, ego doesn't want to ride a bicycle. And you go, you know what, ego, you like chocolates. In order to get a chocolate, you have to go to the shops. Unfortunately, I let out the air of the tires of the car. So you have to get on the bicycle and ride to the shops so you can get a chocolate. And then ego is happy. After riding a bicycle, gets a chocolate. Super simple mechanism and probably slightly disrespectful to the complicated mechanism of the ego. But if it works, let's use it for now. Okay, going back to anchoring vibration. Whenever you're meditating, super simple stuff. You're super quiet, your brain is quiet, no thoughts. Try to focus on sounds. Whenever you're focusing on sounds, focus on the sounds or rhythms inside your head, inside your mind. You may notice that you can hum the melody of whatever's happening in your mind. And when you hum that melody, you remember that melody, try humming it the next time you want to experiment with this, with the state of mind. Especially if you hum this melody a couple of times during your meditation. It's not unlike mantra, really. It's actually very close to a mantra in some ways. You see, an important element when it comes to any sort of mysticism is disassociation from meaning. Whenever you have a mantra, it's best if it's nonsensical for your logical brain, if it cannot dissect the mantra and go like, there should be a comma after the third word, otherwise it is invalid. If it's nonsensical, the brain will take it as it is, will not try to analyze it. If you replace mantra with a piece of music or a few notes when you hum, it can achieve a similar effect. Now, whenever you come up with such melody yourself, the interesting part that appears is your brain, when constructing it, will incorporate your breathing rhythm into that. You'll notice yourself humming a few notes, taking a breath with a pause, humming a few other notes, taking another breath. Whereas if a mantra is constructed by somebody else or contains meaning, this rhythm may not be as transparent, as tailored to your breathing, which is of course super important. Right. We could also experiment with anchoring negative emotions, I guess, if we must, in order to put them in a box, unpack them later on when you're ready to face them, and then see, okay, what can we do with these? But I guess this is not something that we need just now. As I'm on the subject, during meditation, negative emotions sometimes may come up. And there are two ways of approaching. I know, different conversations, but while we're here, might just as well. Two things may come up. You may feel resentment towards yourself or towards others. There you go. This is how the world is divided. Yourself, others. Oh, that's a very clear distinction. Whatever is outside the skin must be others, right? I have no control over that. So good luck controlling what's inside the skin. Okay, so whenever something like that approaches, it is a bit of a test. How much you can step back from your from being involved. How much you can step back from involvement. Usually the recipe is a simple kindness and understanding. And believe you me, it may be tricky if you're personally involved in a traumatic incident. Kindness and understanding, that's tricky stuff. Especially if you have to understand and be kind towards somebody who obviously did something bad to you. In that case, you cannot control outside. Stuff happens, right? But in many cases like that, you review your own emotions and you notice that whatever you were feeling is guilt or shame towards how you reacted. So kindness and understanding goes towards that person that blames themselves for not acting up to some standard that they set for themselves. Alright? You sit there meditating, your brain replays a traumatic event. Speak to that person that survives the trauma. It can be a trauma of a car crash, or it can be a trauma of lost money, I don't know, or something trivial, something broken glass, right? Nothing special, but it causes emotional reaction. Anyway, try to kind of hug that person, visualize hugging that person that's surviving this traumatic event, whatever is the trauma. If your brain brought it up, it probably is important enough for you to review it, to revisit it, to think about it. There's something unresolved there. So give yourself a hug and say it's okay. Now, some people will say, recognize your emotions. Recognize that they're valid, that they have the right to be there. You have 100% right to feel, ashamed or guilty, but you no longer need these emotions. Yes, you felt these at this moment, but they are no longer needed, and you choose to relinquish them. Of course, we could go into details why ego does that. Yeah, but that's a subject for different conversations. So for now, I think we can close the idea of anchoring in a vibration. Just remember, hum a few notes and see how it works out. Maybe it won't. Maybe some people are more inclined towards auditory stimuli. Some will crave something else. But usually with meditation, it is easier because your eyes are generally closed, and this makes you more tuned into auditory channel. All right. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.